Proverbs 1:8. My child, listen when your father corrects you. Don't neglect your mother's instruction. Luke 15:11-24. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this young son packed all of his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming, filled with love and compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. But his father said to the servants, Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring on his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with the feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. So the party began.
Good morning to everyone out there in virtual land. Welcome again to the Mount. Listen, I'm LJay Brown, and I'm excited to be here this morning. I want to start off by just thanking Bishop and Elder for allowing me the opportunity to stand here today with you on this platform. So I really appreciate it. It's an honor, absolutely, to do this with you. And so just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. The perspective or the topic of the conversation this morning from the son's perspective is going to be, don't get too big for your britches. Don't get too big for your britches. And I know a lot of y'all might be looking at the title and y'all probably saying, man, LJay don't even know how to spell britches. And the reality is, The reality is, no, you don't know how to spell britches, because a lot of y'all probably like me, you know what I'm saying, you thought you knew how to spell britches. You probably thought you spelled it the way I think you had to spell it. And as I was studying and doing the lesson, I realized that britches ain't spelled the way we always thought. And now looking at it, I'm almost positive that we don't even pronounce it the way that it's supposed to be pronounced. So I hope my scholars out there in the virtual land will correct everybody online and let everybody know that no, LJay did not spell britches incorrect. All right, but listen, I know at some point in time when you're a child, I know if you at least my age, and I'm 36, if you at least my age, I know that at some point in time, somebody has told you, don't get too big for your britches. I know your mama, your daddy, your auntie, your uncle, your grandma, your somebody along the way has told you, don't you get too big for your britches. And here's what I used to think. When I was a child, I used to think that when somebody would tell you, don't get too big for your britches, I always thought that meant basically just stay in a child's place. I always thought the meaning of don't get too big for your britches, it was just mean stay in a child's place. When somebody tell you, all right now, don't get too big for your britches, I'm getting ready to, I'm gonna whoop them high pot now. Don't get too big for them britches. You know, or they tell you, all right, look now, grown folk talking now, don't get too big for your britches. You going on in the back room. Don't get too big for your britches. I always thought that don't get too big for your britches meant stay in a child's place. But what I really think it means, now that I done gotten older and I done lived a little bit, what I realize is don't get too big for your britches. What it really means, or what it really is, it's really a life lesson. When somebody tell you don't get too big for your britches, it ain't really just trying to get you to stay in a child's place. It's really a life lesson. And when we come back, we're going to get into what some of those life lessons are.
Wow. Well, good morning. Once again, it's a privilege to sit with him, especially after 8 o'clock. I think this was his coming out party. The whole series is called Relatively Speaking. Obviously, for the 10 o'clock worship, we're going to be looking at the story of the prodigal son. I guarantee you most people in church have never even looked up the word prodigal. We've been preaching prodigal son. We've been shouting on prodigal son. But we don't even know what the word prodigal means. I dare say I got prodigal members. I got prodigal choir members. I got prodigal associate ministers. I got prodigal deacons and deaconess, prodigal saints. Because the word prodigal means simply wasting God-given resources. Where we've been limited to this child in the text, this son in the text. I wonder how many of us right now have never used our gifts. You a prodigal believer. I wonder how many of us are using our gifts in ways that God never ordained. You're a prodigal gifted person. So I'm going to be preaching in this blended sermon, same text from a father's perspective. Y'all ready? I'm going to be preaching parental peer pressure. Because I want to suggest that in the body of Christ, we always talk about the peer pressure that our children are under. But you know what? I've learned now some of the greatest peer pressure in our society is not just on children. It's on mom and dad. That's why right now moms are sitting home stressed. That's why fathers are at home right now having to work multiple jobs, because you know what? I think you've fallen victim to parental peer pressure. I'm going to look at this text through the lens of the father. And I want to suggest to you that the father in this story is like many of us. What if, here it is, young blood next to me got me really thinking different. Got me almost ready to preach in a hat next Sunday. Because what if this story is not about the prodigal son, but it's really about the prodigal father? Stay tuned.
All right. One of the first reasons I told y'all, don't get too big for your britches. Don't get too big for your britches. I really think don't get too big for your britches is a life lesson. And one of the first life lessons that I think it is, I really think it's I think it helps us to be careful what you ask for. Right? You got to be careful what you ask for. I gotta give credit to the Chop It Up segment that we do here at the Mount with Chief of Staff, Pastor John, right? I do participate in that. And one of the times we had a conversation one time about this very story. And when we was in there, the question was raised about whether or not the son was really wrong for even asking for an inheritance from the jump. And so what we normally do is, because we have the opportunity of knowing the whole story, we normally want to condemn the son for asking for the inheritance because we know that he ended up wasting it on wild living. But what I want to suggest is, although we know the stories, there's certain things that had to happen before he even got to the point where he lost the money. And so I want to suggest that here, we're dealing with a good father. Right, we dealing with a good father, and there ain't no good father out there that's going to just give his son an inheritance, something that he done worked hard the last 20, 30, 40 years. He ain't going to just give him all his hard-earned money, all his things he done woke up 4, 5 o'clock in the morning for the last 20 years. He ain't going to just give him all that, knowing his son going to go out there and just waste it. So what I want to suggest is this good father had to just come to his son and say, well, look, what you plan on? What are you going to do with this money? I think the son had a plan. I want to suggest that the son had a plan. I want to suggest the son said, well, look, Daddy, this is what I'm going to do. Because say he was going to a distant land. So the son said, look, I'm going to go over here, to the other side of town. I'm going to get me a little spot. You know what I'm saying? And then John got the plug on goats, man. He done told me he can give me like 3 goats a week. So I'm going to get out here and try to hustle these goats. Or I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to invest this money. I just think that the son had a plan because here's what we do though. Sometimes even when you got good intentions though, sometimes even when you got good intentions, even when you thought you done dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's,
Wow.
even when you think you've gotten great counsel and you done got all the advice, sometimes, and here's when you get to the be careful what you ask for part, sometimes that when you acquire something before you really ready to acquire it, you can find yourself still, underwater. You can find yourself in too deep. Even when you think you think you got it all planned out, you got your business plan written, you got everything together, you can still find yourself in over your head. The son ain't the only one. I know how many of y'all, your mama and daddy, it been plenty of times, your mama and daddy, they told you that this wasn't good for you. They told you that this ain't what you needed, but you just had to have it. You just knew that this is what you needed. And so you just had to have it. And then y'all know how it goes. Lo and behold, at the end of the day, no, that's not what you needed. And that's not what was good for you. Look, don't act like sometimes, look, anybody in here, God ever dropped an opportunity in your lap and you blew it? Anybody don't act like God ain't never set something in front of you and you just fumbled it. Sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for.
Wow. You know what? Here's what's so amazing. When I think about parental peer pressure, I'm glad that he gave the father the benefit of the doubt. But it's a statement in the text that jumps out to me that proves what I want to start my portion of the blended sermon with. It says, the son goes to the father and says, I want my share of your resources now. Verse 12, the younger son said, I want my share of your estate. He doesn't say I need it. He says, I want it. You know what's happening right now in our society? This parental peer pressure is catching up with a whole lot of parents. And I want to suggest we're not managing provision. Let me tell you what's getting ready to happen. Parents are getting ready to go right now and buy these $500 sneakers. And your child doesn't have any college fund set up. I want to suggest that one of the detriments is giving people what rightfully one day will belong to them before they're ready to receive it. And too many parents are falling victim to peer pressure. I just got an email the other day from a teacher, and it blew me away because the teacher said that she had a student that came to the first day of school. Brand new Nike sneakers, name brand shirt, name brand pants. And when she said, students, pull out your school supplies, she said the student raised his hand and said, my mama said she wasn't buying any school supplies. But he had on brand new Nikes, name brand jeans and name brand shirt, but no pencil, ink pen, calculator. Could it be that many of us are falling victim to this parental peer pressure now? And because somebody down the street is doing something for their child, you feel obligated to do something for your child. I want to suggest that the father's first mistake was he fell victim to parental peer pressure. And when the son came in and asked for what he wanted, the father gave him money before it was time. I don't know who needs to hear this today around the world. As the young blood would say, put something in the chat now. Because it's a sad commentary when your child has to get a Pell Grant to go to college with red bottoms in the closet. Maybe we're teaching a whole generation to buy hair, buy clothes, buy shoes, buy cars, which are all depreciating assets because we're giving them what they want rather than what they need. I just finished writing a chapter in the book about developing legacy for the family and the church. And I'll never forget, same guy, when he was little, my mother would come over on Christmas with Xboxes and PlayStations, the latest games and all the gadgets. My father-in-law would come over with a U.S. savings bond. And they would say, thanks, Granddaddy, we know what this is, a savings bond. But what he realized was it was better for him to leave them something for the future than to meet their wants in the present. I come against parents around the world. I don't know where you're watching from today. You stumbled into church and your child or your grandchild, your nephew or your niece has told you what they want. And the reality is right now, they might be too young to handle what you're getting ready to give them. That's why Proverbs 11:23 says, a good man leaves an inheritance, here it is, not just to his children, but to his children's children. I just want to challenge you. Are you leaving something so that the third generation will be able to prosper? Or are you buying Nikes, Jordans, standing in line? Man, what did you teach your child when they saw you stand in line for some sneakers, but they've never seen you stand in line to give to the kingdom of God? Could be you're falling victim to parental peer pressure, and you need to learn how to manage provision.
Second life lesson, second way I think we can avoid becoming too big for our britches is, like the son here in this story, we got to put in work. We got to put in work. Verse 14 says, verse 14. Verse 14 said, when his money ran out, about the time when his money ran out, the great famine came over the land, and he began to starve. Now, I want to suggest right then, just like many of you all, I done went out here, my daddy done gave me this money, and I done went out here and I done blew all my money. And not only did I blew all my money, but as soon as I done spent my last $20, the famine came, the pandemic that messed around and came. As soon as he spent his last $20. Now, I know just like many of you are, you know, most of us, as soon as we start starving, it didn't say that he began to get hungry. It said he began to starve. And I know most of us, as soon as that would have happened, most of us would have went on, we would have ran home right then. I'm going home. I done lost all my money. I ain't got nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do out here. And Lord knows a famine came and I'm starving. Most of us right then would have ran home. And so I'm amazed at the fact that the son here in the store, he didn't just tuck tail and run home. He decided to go get a job. He decided to go get a job. And here's the thing, when he went and got a job, right? He didn't go down to the local market, you know, that was hiring and went in and got a job. He didn't find nowhere that had a help wanted sign in the window. It's saying in the story that he just went to a local farmer and persuaded him to hire him. The farmer won't necessarily hiring. I want to suggest the son just decided, look, I done lost everything, the family here, I'm hungry, I got to do whatever it is I got to do. So he just went to the farmer and just persuaded him. The farmer won't hire him, the farmer didn't need any help. The son just said, look, I got to go out here, I milk the cows, I get the hay bales together, I slop around in the pigs. I'm just gonna do whatever it is I gotta do. Most of us, we're too picky to do that. No, I don't work fast food, you know. No, I don't do that. When you starving, no, you work fast food. When you starving, you do whatever it is. When you starving, you go somewhere that ain't even hiring. Look, do y'all got anything for me to do in here today? He just went to the farmer and he had to persuade the man to hire him. Which means he probably told him no the first time. He didn't give up. That man was willing to do whatever it is he had to do. And then here's the other thing that I want to suggest. I want to suggest that he got that good work ethic from his father. I want to suggest that his father showed him a work ethic when he was little, when he was young. His father showed him when times get hard, this is what you do. When you start to struggle, you don't just tuck tail and hide and run. No, you get out there and work. You get out there and do whatever it is that you got to do. I think his father instilled a good work ethic in him. And then I love, and Bishop alluded to it a little bit at the 8 o'clock sermon. But I think that my parents, I know, Kimberly's here. I know that my parents back in the day, they lived for an opportunity to show us tough love. They loved an opportunity. I dare say they enjoyed a moment where they could give us tough love. They absolutely couldn't wait for the opportunity to have us to learn that hard lesson. And I love the fact that they did that, because what it does for us now is when times get hard, when things, we start struggling out here, we don't just run and quit and tuck tail and run home and ask mama to take care of everything. Before I can go home, I got to at least show that I tried. I got to at least show that I done pulled up my sleeves and I did everything I can. I think the father instilled that work at him, and it showed him that tough love, so that when times got hard, only after he tried was he willing to say, all right, I tried it, I gave it everything I had, and it didn't work. But you can't do that first until you try to put in some work.
Wow. Parental peer pressure. I think the first thing we got to do is learn how to manage provision. But he took me to my second thought. Not only do we need to learn how to manage provision, but we got to model principles. You know what stood out to me in the text is when the boy ends up in the hog pen, he starts to reflect on what he's seen in the home. And he says, you know what? Even in my daddy's house, the servants had enough food. Now, I know we want to make that about money. It's not about money. It's about principle. God, help me. Put that in the chat. You know what he's saying? My father modeled in front of me, respecting everybody. Even the people that were servants in the house got treated well. I'm not accustomed to being in an atmosphere where I don't see everybody treated well and everybody loved. Here's what I want to ask parents out there today. If your child grows up to be you, what kind of person will he be? What have you modeled in the household? When your child ends up in the hog pen, what will they remember about being in the home? Did you teach them how to call their mother out of another name? Did you teach them how to disrespect the man that was bringing home the bread? Did you teach them how to cheat? How to lie? Did you teach them how to gossip and talk about everybody? What have you modeled in front of your child? Because that's when times get tough, that's what your child is going to remember. I love the fact that when this young man, this son, ends up in a low point in his life and he reflects on what he was raised in, he says, I'm not used to seeing people that didn't care for everybody. I'm not used to. Right now, I'm proud of the fact that my son gives to homeless people because he saw his father give to homeless people. I'm proud of the fact that hopefully he's sitting over there on the right side today because he understands what's on the bloodline, what he's seen modeled. I hope the reason he treats his wife the way he treats his wife is because he saw his father opening the door for his mother. I want to ask you personally, my brother, right now, what have you already taught your son? Sister, what have you already taught your daughter? It was amazing because yesterday I cracked 3 eggs in the frying pan and one of the eggs was bad. And I heard my mother from when I was a teenager saying, never crack the eggs over the pan because one of them might be bad. And I said, my mother taught me better than that. Hopefully when your child is at a low point, they'll be able to say, my mother taught me better than that. Hopefully your son will be able to say, my father taught me better than that. Hopefully when he operates counterproductive to what you taught him, he'll be able to say, I wasn't raised this way. Hopefully he'll be able to point back to when he was a little boy and say, my daddy prayed every morning. My daddy taught me how to say thank you. My mother taught me how to give God his offering. My daddy taught me to use my gifts in the kingdom. My mother taught me to make sure I respect everybody. My daddy taught me to say yes, sir, and no, sir. My mother taught me to always respect my elders. My daddy taught me to always be sensitive to the needs of other people. My mother taught me to always be concerned about somebody that's less than me. My daddy taught me never think too much highly of yourself. My mother always taught me sit low and be asked to come high. I wonder what it is that your child in their lowest moment is going to remember about you. I hope parental peer pressure doesn't cause us to stop modeling principles.
One of the last things here, one of the last ways, one of the last life lessons, last ways I think we can avoid becoming too big for our britches is, like the son in the story here, he had a responsibility mindset. He had a responsibility mindset. I love the fact that the son here, he simply just admitted his own mistakes. He admitted to his own, he took full responsibility of everything that happened. You say he got out there, and I love Bishop alluded to the fact that he said he thought about what was going on. Bishop said he was thinking of the things that he was taught in his past. I love the fact that he thought about his actions. See, I think when he said, it says when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, even at home, the hired servants has food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I want to say that's him. He's thinking about his actions right now. He know I done made a mistake. I done got out here. I done asked my daddy for half his inheritance. And here I am. I done blew it all. I done asked my daddy for this. This is my decision. This is something that I done did. This is something that a position that I have put myself in. And I have made this. Look, I done sinned. He said he even takes it further and said, I'm going to just tell my daddy, I done sinned against heaven and you, and I ain't even no longer being worthy of being called your son no more. He thought about his actions. He thought about his mistakes. He thought about everything he did and took responsibility for it. He ain't had no pity party. He didn't say, well, if it weren't for the famine, I would have been all right. Well, if everything had went as planned, everything would have been cool. He never did he come up with an excuse for why he was where he was. He just took full responsibility for what it was. And I love that he thought about his actions. Most of us, when we make mistakes, y'all know, we so busy just trying to get to the apology because we want to move on. But when you was a child, what your mom and dad made you go in the room, they said, go in the room and think about what you did. I love the fact that the son thought about his actions and he thought about where he went wrong and that sort of thing. And then this is the favorite thing that I love the fact he did. When he came back, he didn't expect to come back in the same graces that he had when he left.
My God, son.
Because he sat there and said, Father, I done sinned against heaven and you, and I ain't even worthy of being called your son no more. A lot of us, we think we can just go out here and rip and run and act crazy, do whatever we want to do, and think when you come back home, you're going to have the same bedroom. I left one time before. When I came back, my bedroom gone. Kimberly had my bedroom. You don't just get to come back and come back and have the same position you had when you left. You went out there and messed up. You went out there and made the mistake, and you got the nerve to think you will just come back and hold the same position you had when you left. And I love the fact that he didn't even have that. He was thinking to himself, I'm just going to tell my daddy, man, I done sinned against you. And then I love the fact that when he did it, and he came back in, and he started talking to his daddy, and he said the same thing. I done sinned against you, and and heaven, I ain't even worthy of being called your son. I love the fact that the father just sat there and said, look, quick, go get that rope. It's almost like he didn't even want to allow him to finish it, because the thing is, that's the father's decision of whether you're going to come back in the same graces or not. That ain't your decision. And I really think the father did that because the son showed how humble he was. He humbled himself and said, look, I done messed up. I done did wrong. I done got out here and spent all your money. I just humbling myself. Look, even the hired servant, just take me back as a hired servant. I don't even got to be called your son no more. And I think the father respected the fact that he humbled himself enough. He saw that the son had learned from his mistakes and wanted to do better and said, look, forget all that, man. Go get that robe and put on my son back. Go get that ring and put on his finger. Go get that carrot that we've been fattening because we're going to celebrate. He done already learned the lesson. That's the father's decision. I just love the fact that the son didn't anticipate. He didn't expect to come back in the same graces that he had when he left. That's the father's decision. So we got to have a responsibility mindset.
Wow. You know what I like? I'm right where he is. I hope I'm talking to a father or a mother out there today. We hope that we've inspired you. Here's what we challenge you to do. Sit down with your children and watch these 2 sermons. Because here's what I love about the father. We cannot succumb to parental peer pressure. Can I show you this last point? Here it is. We've got to learn how to monitor the process. Don't stop the process, but monitor the process. He did not stop the son from getting a job in the pig pen. He did not stop the son from wasting all of his money. He did not bail the son out. He did not run after the son. He did not chase after the son. He did not try to abort the process. But it's clear that he was monitoring the process. It's clear that the father must have had a threshold for how far he was going to allow his son to go. Can I suggest to you, here it is, I'm getting ready to mess you up. I want to suggest that the father and the farmer were friends. There it is. I want to suggest to you that when the farmer hired the son, he called up the father and said, man, I got LJay over here. I can prove it to you. I'll never forget. You might not remember, but I'll never forget the day at Indian River High School when Dr. Leo Whitaker rode up to Indian River High School and met with my son, carried him in the middle of the class day down to the library and started to talk to him. All of us need somebody around us that can help us. It takes a village. But the problem is too many parents fall victim to parental peer pressure. and you don't want anybody else to know that there's some stuff going on in your house. You don't want anybody else to know that you and your child are working through some situations. And so what I've learned is, just like this man in the text, I hope that you will never fall victim to parental peer pressure to the point that you don't monitor the process that your child is going through. Let them learn how to fall. Let them learn how to eat in the pig pen. Then they'll invite you to be able to celebrate the opportunity to give them that good fried chicken. I still remember when he moved out of the house because he had gotten too big for his breeches or his britches. And when he came back to the house that Sunday and he rung the doorbell and his mother came to the door and she said, "Why are you here?" He said, "I'm here because it's Sunday. We having Sunday dinner." She said, "Oh no, Sunday dinner is for people who live by my rules. I'm cooking fried chicken, but now that you've grown, you ought to be able to find yourself somewhere to eat." Now I got sense enough to know she wasn't going to let him starve, but she was going to let the process be what the process was supposed to be. And now we got evidence that the process must have been okay, because now I'm standing on the stage with the same son that went out there, the same son that had to endure the process. And true to fact, when he came back, a hurricane was coming. He came back and he said, "Daddy, I'm not a man. They talking about this thing is going to blow over people's houses. Can I just come in the house? I don't want my old bedroom back. Can I just get in the house? I don't care if y'all don't let me sit at the table. Can I just get in the house?" Every now and then, parents, you got to make sure that you don't fall victim to parental peer pressure. Look, we've given you 2 best blended sermons that we've ever had. I'm just so excited that today I had the privilege, as a prodigal father, to sit with my son and hopefully be able to change and touch your life. Don't get too big for your britches, and don't fall victim to parental peer pressure. At 8 o'clock, he had the privilege of leading you to Christ. At 10 o'clock, I have the privilege. Wherever you are around the world right now, if you desire to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, because of his generation, we've made it easy for you. All you got to do is text the word "accept" to 71441. If you desire to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, it's that simple. Text the word "accept" to 71441. As he said earlier, perhaps you don't pray like you used to. The relationship that you used to have with God is not where it used to be, and you want to fix that today. All you got to do is text the word "restart" to 71441. And finally, out of the words of the pastor of TMP, my son, if you want to become a part of this amazing church, I listen to how he says amazing. If you believe he's your pastor, or I'm your pastor, that you're supposed to be a part of TMP, the Mount Portsmouth Church Redefined. Today, we're both Church Redefined. I've been preaching 31 years. This is the first time I've ever preached sitting down in a chair because of his influence. So if you want to become a part of what God is doing here and connect yourself in covenant, all you got to do is text the word "mount up" to 71441. Now, as soon as you do it, you're going to be prompted and given some instructions. Give Pastor LJay or Bishop Kim W. Brown the opportunity to continue to serve you, because we believe church is supposed to change lives.
Now unto him who was able to keep us from falling and to present us faultless to the presence of his glory. To the only wise Savior, to the only wise God our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power. I call us blessed in the city, blessed in the field, blessed when we come, blessed when we go. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.